Hi, the topic today will be on trade unions in Malaysia. The industrial relation system of any country is a formal arrangement that establishes and maintains the relationship between employers and employees. Central to the system is the role of government, which acts as the regulation body through passing and enforcing legislation. In Malaysia, the system adopted reflects the tripartite principle practiced in many countries of bringing together these three key players to address the industrial relations issues. The differing ways in which these three groups interact account for the variations in different countries' systems of industrial relations. A key variable in industrial relations is decision-making in the areas relating to work life. The rules and regulations on compensation, workers' rights, disciplines, and the duties and performance of employees can be met in any of these three ways: unilaterally, bilaterally, or in a tripartite manner. Where decisions are made unilaterally, they are made by the management on behalf of the employer without any interference by the workers or any other party. For many managers and companies, this is the preferred situation. They strongly believe in the right or prerogative of management to make decisions without the involvement of any third party. However, if the workers have some right to participate in such decision-making, as is common when the workers organize themselves into trade unions, then the process is said to be bilateral. From time to time, the government of a country plays a role in drafting and presenting to Parliament labour laws which affect work life. In Malaysia, before such laws are presented to Parliament, there are tripartite discussion. For example, all the three parties, the employers, unions representing the employees, and the government will sit together to agree on what laws or amendments to the laws are necessary. The machinery in Malaysia for this tripartite discussion is the National Labour Advisory Council, and this advisory body consists of representatives from each of these three sectors. The Minister of Human Resources chairs the discussion and appoints the government representatives, and the other members of the council are appointed after consultation with relevant bodies. These include the workers' organizations, the Malaysian Trade Union Congress MTUC, and the Congress of Unions in the Public and Civil Services QPEX, as well as the Malaysian Employers Federation MEF representing the employers. The council meets at least twice a year, and it also meets where there are urgent matters to attend to, such as approving amendments to the law. And as enshrined by the International Labour Organization, or the ILO, the involvement of employees and the associations in such direct discussions provides the platform for maintaining a good, harmonious employment relationship, at the same time as ensuring that employees' rights are protected. A trade union is an organization representing workers in the workplace and seek to regulate the employment relationship through the direct process of collective bargaining with management. It represents people who work in a particular industry, protects their rights, and discusses their pay and working conditions with employers. It is any organization in which the membership consists of employees seeking to organize and represent their interests both in the workplace and society. And according to the ILO, it is workers' organization constituted for the purpose of furthering and defending the interests of workers. In Malaysia, the definition of trade union is stipulated in the Trade Unions Act 1959, which is enforced by the Department of Trade Unions Affairs. This act is the main legislation that governs the trade unions' establishment and operations in Malaysia. In the year 2015, more than 900,000 Malaysian workers in the private and public sectors belong to a trade union. While this is not a large proportion of the workforce, roughly only 80%, the influence of unions goes beyond their membership. All workers who are eligible to be union members receive terms and conditions of service laid down in the agreement whether or not they are union members. Furthermore, trade unions act as a pressure group on the government pushing for the introduction of legislation and systems which will benefit workers in general. Workers in most sectors of the economy have been organized into unions. The organization has not been confined to production workers, but includes those in supervisory and management level jobs, white-collar workers, and many executives. So why workers join trade union? There are 6 characteristics of a trade union. The first characteristic is as the association of employees. Trade union is an association of employees belonging to a particular class of employment, profession, trade, or industry. The second characteristic is trade union as voluntary association. An employee joins the trade union out of his free will and cannot be forced to join a union. A trade union is also a permanent body. Members may come and go, but the trade union usually remains. The member of a trade union have certain matters of common interest, which includes job security, better pay, and working conditions, which bring them together. A trade union is also a collective action. Even when an individual employee has any grievance over certain management decisions, the matter is sorted out by the intervention of the trade union. Employees are able to initiate collective action to solve any problem concerning any particular employee or all the employees. The sixth characteristics of trade union is building rapport with the management. The trade union seeks to improve relations between the employees and employers. The official of the trade union hold talks with the members of the management concerning the problems of the employees in order to find an amicable solution. It is thus possible for the employees to have better rapport with the management. There are 5 concepts of trade union's effectiveness. The first one is the union sustainability. The ability of a trade union to persevere in its working environment is an important factor that contributes to trade union effectiveness. Both private and public sectors provide different working environments for the workers as well as the trade unions. The most common challenges faced by the trade union in private sector is the economic conditions and employer prerogatives. Thus, being able to adapt to these changing working environments could make trade unions more pertinent to the workers. The second concept is union membership and leadership. One of the most important indicators of trade unions' effectiveness is their strength. Strength is a multidimensional concept. Nevertheless, the common ways to measure strength of a trade union is by the size of the membership as well as types of leadership. A trade union that has a large membership among the labor force is considered strong in number. This is usually reported as trade union density. Similarly, a trade union is considered effective if it has a respectable leader. This type of leader is able to serve the members well and at the same time maintains productive relationships with the employer. The effectiveness of a trade union is also determined by the degree and character of support on the part of its structures. In addition, the capacity to deliver to its members is determined by the success rate of collective bargaining and agreements. The third concept is union objectives. A trade union is pointless and useless without members. Therefore, the primary objective of a trade union formation is to meet its members' need by protecting and promoting their interest. Specifically, this objective is translated into the following roles that include representing workers in negotiation and collective bargaining, workplace disputes, and litigation. For example, trade unions voice the interest of their members to the employer with respect to terms and conditions of employment such as pay, working hours, annual leave, and public holidays. Trade unions also advocate for members' rights as when representing them in court proceedings, particularly in labor-related disputes. In summary, objectives outlined by trade unions that are consistent with their members' aspirations do contribute to the effectiveness as a whole. Number 4 is union contribution. Workers join a trade union partly because they believe that the entity is able to contribute to their welfare and well-being with respect to their employment. At the macro level, trade unions are considered effective if they are able to contribute and to promote industrial harmony at the enterprise, industry, and national levels. In addition, trade unions would also be able to provide assistance in terms of labor-related policy formulation. The last concept is union achievements and successes. A trade union is considered effective if it is able to achieve its goals successfully. These goals represent the interests of its members. The common measures of trade union success include its ability in conducting collective bargaining activities, leading to sound collective agreements and favorable decisions in trade disputes. Trade unions that have good track records and achievements project a positive image to their existing and prospective members. This good reputation will either directly or indirectly help in developing trust or increase the interest of workers to join trade unions or remain as members. Societal and economic developments are giving rise to new forms of employment. These developments include the need for increased flexibility by both employers and workers, the broader use of advanced information and communication technologies, and the enhanced importance of specific business activities and occupation. There are 9 new forms of employment being identified. So in relation to new employment relationships that differ from the traditional concept of one employer and one employee, 2 new employment forms are emerging, which are the employee sharing and job sharing. So employee sharing means that an individual worker is jointly hired by a group of employers who are not clients of a traditional temporary work agency. Such workers rotate between the different companies. In contrast to this is job sharing, in which a single employer hires 2 or more workers to jointly fill a specific job. A third employment form that redefines the employment relationship is voucher-based work, in which the employment relationship and related payment is based on a voucher rather than an employment contract. In most cases, the workers then have a status somewhere between employees and self-employed. As regard to new work patterns, these include interim management, casual work, ICT-based mobile work, crowd employment, portfolio work, and collaborative employment. Interim management is a new work pattern among employees and describes situations in which a worker, usually a highly skilled expert, is hired for a temporary period of time by an employer, often to conduct a specific project or solve a specific problem. In contrast to traditional fixed-term work arrangements, interim management has some elements of consultancy, but the expert has employee status rather than an external advisor. And then we have casual work, which is also employee-oriented. Here, the employer is not obliged to regularly provide the worker with work, but has the flexibility to call them when needed. Next is the ICT-based mobile work, refers to work patterns characterized by the worker, whether employee or self-employed, operating from various possible locations outside the premises of their employer, for example at home, at the client's premises, or even on the road. And they are supported by modern technologies such as laptop and tablet computers. This is different from traditional teleworking in the sense of being even less place-bound. For the self-employed and freelancers, crowd employment is a new option. This is also characterized by not being place-bound. Virtual platforms match a large number of buyers and sellers of services or products, often with larger tasks being broken down into small jobs. In a similar way, portfolio work done by the self-employed refers to a situation in which they work for a large number of clients, providing just small amounts of work for each of them. Finally, new patterns of self-employment in the form of new collaborative models that go beyond traditional business partners relationships were found in a variety of countries. For collaborative employment, where freelancers, the self-employed or micro-enterprises cooperate in some way to overcome limitations of size and professional isolation. Thus, those new forms of employment can guide a management for a newly innovative way of work to attract their desired type of employees. Next, we are going to look at the informal sectors. So the term informal sector has been used by the ILO since the early 1970s and represents a considerable intellectual investment in a concept that has been well used but also heavily criticized. For trade unions, the important point is that here is a sector that is almost completely non-unionized, unprotected, where labor exploitation takes place, but where the normal conditions for trade union action do not apply. There are few identifiable employers. Enterprises are small and unregistered. People exploit themselves and their families, and women in particular are exploited. Yet, with little access to capital, uncertain markets, and reliance on unequal exchanges with the formal sector, workers have little choice but to continue with this cycle of labor and exploitation. There have developed some quasi-trade union organizations to defend themselves against exploitation, but these are mainly based on residents rather than industry. The need is there, but the conditions of organizing to meet this need are problematic. For cooperatives, this is a sector where people are entrepreneurial, make the most of what capital they have, whether it can be human, physical, or even financial, and are used to surviving by trading in a highly competitive market. Much of their strength comes from informal, cooperative relationships between people based on kinship, friendship, and neighborhood, and they have developed some quasi-cooperative organizations based on individual trades and neighborhoods. The message is clear. Trade unions have a duty to organize among these people as workers, and they have some defensive self-organizations on which to build. Cooperatives have considerable affinity with them as entrepreneurs and have some quasi-cooperative self-organizations on which to build. Many people have very strong views about unions. Such views are dependent upon a person's position in society, background, and experiences. Certainly, the public image of unions is less than respectable. The image of the union as a low-class, disreputable organization still persists. In the early years of union development in Malaysia, there was a generally held view that communism and trade unions were closely allied. Some people, especially employers and businessmen, criticize unions for making exorbitant wage demands, thus pushing up the cost of doing business, causing inflation, protecting incompetent workers, disrupting important public services such as transport and utilities, and even committing acts of violence. Those who support unions claim that workers need to be protected from the exploitation of greedy employers and unjust management actions. Exploitation is not a phenomenon found only in the past, in the dark ages of industrialization, but is an ongoing problem. For instance, examples of employers who deduct employees' provident fund contributions from their employees' wages but do not remit the money to the fund are common. Unions are often seen as a negative force limiting the powers of management to run the organization as they see fit. Unions are viewed as a pressure group trying to obstruct managers in their jobs. There has also been a long history of hostile relations between unions and employers, where industrial relations is seen as a battleground with the truce being enforced most of the time. There have been many incidents of violence which have served to sour the relations between workers and employers. So does industrial relations have to be a scenario involving conflict? Can unions cooperate with employers so that both parties can benefit? There is no sound reason why unions cannot harmoniously work together with managers to increase the productivity of the organization. Japanese unions have been reasonably successful in achieving this objective. In order for harmony to exist between employers and unions, workers must be confident that any increased profits which results from their efforts will be fairly shared between the company's owners and themselves. They must trust the management of the organization to balance the interests of all the affected parties, including shareholders, customers, the management, themselves and the workers. This trust is fragile and easily lost. There are plenty of examples of management who have awarded themselves large pay increases but retrenched lower-level workers in the same year on the grounds of financial difficulties facing the company. Actions such as these make it difficult for union leaders and workers to believe in the fairness of employers. It is problems such as these which further the them and us gap between workers, unions and employers and give impetus to the continued support workers give union.